Welcome to the very first edition of what we're calling 49 Clicks. It's a podcast, but on YouTube. And I am joined with my friends Marta and Bailey. Say hello, Marta,
Hello, everyone.
and say hello, Bailey.
Hello, everyone.
So we thought there's a lot going on in the world right now, and all of us are on TikTok and we're all on social media, and there's so much happening in Canada specifically, but also globally. And what better way to try to manage our mental health and the world at the same time than sitting around talking with your friends about some of the most scary news items and just stuff that we're concerned about each week? So the idea is every week we're going to each bring our own topic, we're going to talk it through, and then we're going to have a little bit of a chat about it. And hopefully, it'll help some of you at home as well who are going through these things and you're reading the news headlines, or like me, you get a breaking news alert on your phone all the time, and it's like breaking news, and you're thinking, what has Trump done now?
My
And this
breaking
will,
news alert is you.
yes, our group breaking news alert is I get the breaking news and then I tell Bailey and Marta what's going on. So we thought, hey, why don't we sit down and have a chat about it? Because I'm sure there are so many of you out there who are also kind of experiencing that as well. And maybe you need someone to talk to or listen to. And so, yeah, I got my friends together and we're just going to get through this together.
Yeah, it's kind
So,
of like a little coffee chat.
exactly. I don't have coffee tonight. I only have water, but Um, this will be our little group hang, so hopefully you guys will join us every week. And I think we are recording this on Thursday, January 29th, or what will also be known as the day David Eby announced that there was treason in Canada. So, as you can tell,
Yay.
the headlines have been a little bit stressful. Girls, how are you dealing?
Um,
Uh,
you know what? I won't lie. I think just speaking to what you just mentioned, what David Eby said, it was kind of a bit of a relief because it's like, we know this is what's going on. We understand that this is the reality. Like, we all exist in the Canadian politics space online. So, like, we have been very aware of the connections between what's going on in the States and what's going on in Canada. And it does definitely go beyond the trade war. And it's also an escalation of something that's been going on for decades when it's come specifically to Alberta. So honestly, it was nice. It was nice to see a politician calling it like it is. And I mean, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that it will lead to some action. Words is a lot, but actions would mean much more. So let's see some indictments.
yeah, I agree. Like to me, I mean, hearing him say that, it wasn't shocking at all because I remember posting TikToks like a year ago calling this treason. Um, and I kind of wish that politicians had spoken up about this sooner. But I am glad that they finally have.
Yeah, for sure. I
Um,
think it's shocking to hear though, right? Like it's I mean,
yeah.
we know it's happening, but also hearing the words come out of his mouth was a bit like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's
especially from, someone who was our attorney general, as you mentioned on threads, reminding everybody like, hey, this is not just, an insult that the, premier of BC is throwing out there. This is somebody who has a very good understanding of the law, right? So sometimes I wonder if maybe they've kind of been, I don't want to say sitting on it, but because I do think that they're probably a lot more on the pulse and a lot more aware than we give them credit for sometimes, like premiers and politicians in general. I have wondered if maybe they have been kind of quiet on some of these things because there's stuff that, there are investigations that we're obviously not privy to. So I'm kind of hopeful for that. But then also at the same time, I mean, when you look at what's happened in the States, I think it's very fair for Canadians to want action.
100%. And I agree, Bailey. I think that, a part of why they may have waited is they don't want to cause like mass panic. Yeah, we've been causing the mass panic.
Yeah. Listen, I know that for a solid year now, I personally have been called a warmonger, lying opportunist who is benefiting from the idea of Canada being invaded. But I assure you, no, it's just the thing that keeps me up at night.
Yep, it's just something that Canadians are worried about, and for good reason.
Yeah, I think it's also really tempting to, I mean, it's there's so much grief in all of this. And naturally part of that is denial, right? Like it is really hard to face that this is the time that we're living in. I mean, just in general with many things, but specifically when it comes to really the relationship between Canada and the US, it is this is beyond a rupture, and it is very much you know, not only a make or break moment as far as like what we choose to do from it, but like no matter what happens, things are just never going to be the same. And there's a lot that comes with that because our countries are so intertwined. And as a society, like, you know, we're culturally, we're very connected. And a lot of us have friends and family living in the US and vice versa for Americans. So it's definitely hard to face that reality. But I am thankful that people like you, Kat, for example, have been trying very hard to call it like it is, because I think that it's really important. It's very easy to just fall into, okay, well, like, let's see it play by play. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But I think just the sooner that people did start saying, hey, this is this person, meaning Donald Trump and his administration, we already have enough information about them to understand like what their MO is and where this is headed. And so the sooner that, you know, Canadians can recognize what's going on and move through those stages of denial and grief, like I think the better. So I think it's really important. And I'm sorry that, you know, as part of that process, you got pretty slammed by a lot of people online.
Yeah, it was a bit awkward. If anybody hasn't seen that TikTok video I made like a year ago, it went pretty viral. It got about 20 million views in a couple of days. And I was in my pajamas and just was saying like, "Oh my God, I just got off of ironically, another like video chat with some writer friends in the States." And I was like, they have no idea that Canadians are preparing for war. I can't believe that like my comment was meant to be saying we're having two very different conversations in our two countries, where Canadians had heard Justin Trudeau's hot mic moment where he was saying like, actually, yeah, like the invasion threats, the 51st state threats are real. And he was preparing business leaders at the time and energy leaders. That's where the hot mic happened. And I think for us in Canada, we had already spent a week talking about the tariffs, talking about elbows up and changing our groceries. And we had already been having these regular conversations on TikTok. And so I casually was like, oh, like crazy that we're having totally different conversations, not thinking anyone would see it. And it went all over the place. And suddenly Americans viewed it as us or me saying we were going to roll tanks across the border,
Yeah.
which wasn't at all what I was saying.
No.
But it's wild to see like a full year later where we've come, because at the time I remember very specifically, people kept saying like, do you mean a real war or an economic war? To which like, well, an economic war is still a war.
Definitely.
And usually precedes other types of war.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But also at the time, I was very clear. I was like, no, like, I mean a boots on the ground war, because Melanie Joly, and I think people just weren't seeing a lot of information. Melanie Joly had said, no, he has been threatening us since November 2024. This is an actual like annexation, invasion, occupation. And now a year later, we have seen the military reports come out saying that Canada's military has been preparing for this as exercises. They've been running through the scenarios of what could happen. So I think sometimes a lot of, like Bailey, you were saying, some stuff is happening behind the scenes, like those military plans we didn't know of last year at this time. I mean, I assumed that somebody was preparing. as far as the military. If we ourselves were stocking up on canned goods, they were probably also preparing in the military. But yeah, to see it all come full circle and to see all of us who have been saying this is treason and everything else, finally a premier went out on a stage today to say, yeah, the actions that are going on are treasonous. It was very interesting. But Bailey, I know that you have been following along with everything in Alberta a lot more closely, I will admit, than what I follow along with. I am more of like an international global politics person. And Bailey is my friend that I go to when I need to know what's happening in Alberta. So, what is your story of the week?
Well, so first of all, I just want to clarify for anybody who is listening, who might be wondering, like, why treason? Like, why are we suddenly throwing out that term specifically? Does that have to do with the referendum? No, it's really important to differentiate, what is still a small group of people living in Alberta who want to sign a referendum expressing, discontent about their being a part of Canada, and basically, how the federal government has quote unquote been treating Alberta, which is a whole conversation on its own. But that is very different from what EB was commenting on, because what EB was referring to was an even smaller group of people that are actually meeting with the Trump administration to procure essentially a loan, a $500 billion loan. And in exchange, the Trump administration would start to provide this small group in Alberta with the supports that they would need to basically arm themselves in their fight for independence against Canada.
Oh God, it's infuriating.
Yeah, like, and hopefully, just even briefly describing that, the average listener can understand how those two things are very, very different. We have had referendums in Quebec, obviously. That's an ongoing discussion, again, for another time. But that is a completely different situation from what we're seeing here. And anybody who's lived in Alberta, now, full disclosure, I'm not from Alberta. I had family who spent a lot of their life working in Alberta, specifically in gas and in oil and gas, but I'm from Saskatchewan. But anybody who's, been at all connected to people living in Alberta knows that this is an escalation of something that's been happening for a long time, because the reality is that American media and energy powers have been lobbying for conservative governments in Alberta for decades, because they want what Alberta has, right? These natural resources. And so it's in the best interest of oil companies for Alberta to have a government that prioritizes that above all else. And so as part of that, we've seen, governments consistently, conservative governments in Alberta that have cut education, cut healthcare, and quite frankly, exposed Albertans to a lot of propaganda that is just like raw oil and gas. It's been in the making for a really, really long time. So this is just an escalation of something that's been in the works, and of, to be quite honest, American imperialism. But obviously this has come to a really critical breaking point where we are actually talking about military invasion. And, under the Trump administration, we've just seen that speed on ahead at, I have to admit, I feel kind of naive, but I wasn't even necessarily expecting it at this point in my lifetime. So it's come a lot faster than expected, which is, going back to that denial piece. It's like you kind of have to almost keep snapping your fingers and be like, no, this is happening right now. This is reality. I have to face reality as it is. But yeah, so that's an important, really important distinction. What is happening right now specifically is arguably treason. and it well surpasses the lobbying and really shady and potentially illegal shit that's been happening up until this point.
And I will just say, like, the details that have come out, not only was Evie talking about this, Evie mentioned the article in the Financial Times that came out yesterday that was covering this, but there have been other articles in the Edmonton Journal and in DeSmog and other pieces that have been written about this where we've seen details specific. So part of this group, the Alberta Prosperity Project, and have been talking to leaders very close within the White House, within the administration, is what they're saying. And they said that last April there was a trip that they went down to Washington, D.C., and it was called like the New Alberta or something. It has like some title, the Commonwealth of Alberta Project or something.
Oh my goodness.
They went in April of 2025. They went down there and they talked to people like right next to, in line to the president, essentially, is what they're saying. And in that agreement, that was going to be a $500 million loan that was coming from the US. And while the new Alberta, the country of Alberta, was going to guarantee that they'd have 3% GDP per year go to military spending, they know that they won't be able to have that right away. So the US government is planning to instill their own military to protect Canada. At the conference last year that was held by Rebel News, when they were talking about separatism in July, they were talking about these meetings that happened in April. And they also said a representative from the American Fund actually brought up ICE, saying that ICE was great in the state and the United States, and they would hope to bring it back to Alberta and sort of use ICE to be able to maintain their borders and immigration. And they also made a deal saying part of this whole speech that they've been telling the separatists and they've been selling them on is that any Canadian currency held by people in Alberta in this new country, that would be dollar for dollar exchanged for US currency, because the Americans have offered to make US currency the currency of Alberta, the new Alberta, whatever they're going to call it.
It's temporarily, of course.
Yeah.
So there's definitely, like, it's when we talk about treason, we're not just talking about like the ideologies of America coming into Alberta. We're talking about like logistically planning ways to like maintain borders, have a currency, and in exchange, the US would be getting oil, water, agriculture, and specifically workers, which was an interesting thing that they were a high selling point on, was getting those Alberta workers. But yeah, just for details, if anybody else is wondering about that, continue on though, Bailey, because you are the person. I find this all interesting.
No. You brought up something really important too. As it stands, Danielle Smith is funding an independent, quote, police task force within Alberta, which in essence, I mean, it's even crazy that this is happening and we're talking about it, especially given what has just happened in the States with ICE. It's been happening the whole time, but what has just happened publicly and to white people in public executions in the state from ICE in the States. But that is in essence, like when you watch the presser on it with her, it is almost exactly a carbon copy of how ICE came to be. Oh, okay, well, it's just going to be for these purposes and in this context, but yes, it's going to be independent of the RCMP and also of like local police. It's a nightmare. So, we've seen those things slowly start to accumulate. All the things that you mentioned, Kat, and even just recently, I think it's important to note that Danielle Smith said on a radio show that she wishes she could direct the judges.
Oh my gosh.
Like, hello. Where have we heard that before? And so the chief justices of the Alberta courts came out with a statement. If you guys are down, I'd like to read it because I think it's important.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So it says, as proud Albertans, we care deeply about this province and the people of Alberta. The judges on Alberta's 3 courts, the Court of Justice, the Court of King's Bench, and the Court of Appeal, Recognize that our fundamental role is to serve Albertans. We do this by upholding our oath of office to decide each case honestly, impartially, and to the best of our ability. We know that our decisions can profoundly impact the people who come before the courts. We take this responsibility seriously. A properly functioning democracy requires 3 separate branches of government that exercise their power and authority independently according to the Constitution. The executive branch makes policy and manages government operations. The legislative branch makes laws. In turn, the judicial branch interprets and applies those laws to disputes brought before the courts. If a party requests it, judges may be required to interpret and apply the Constitution and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and make a ruling. The independence of each branch ensures that there are checks and balances across the system. It is the foundation of a healthy democracy. Public trust and confidence in our institutions and all 3 branches of government depend on it. It is equally important that each branch respect and support the independence of others. Independence of the judicial branch protects the public and ensures judges can make decisions based solely on the law and evidence presented, and it frees judges from pressures or influence from external sources, including the governments that appoint us. Each day in Alberta's courthouses, judges apply the law to protect individual rights, decide disputes fairly, and hold parties, including governments, accountable. The rule of law means no one is above the law. Everyone is treated equally before the law, and power is not used arbitrarily. Alberta's judges will continue to do this work faithfully. Alberta's judges are Albertans, like the people we serve. We are proud of the work judges and staff do every day to protect the rights of all Albertans to safeguard our democracy. So that's basically all to say. Kindly F off, Danielle. hands off our courts. I know that I made like a stick figure video that kind of goes over constitutional monarchy and the 3 branches of government for anybody who like needs a primer or a refresher. But I think that, like, first of all, it's just very rare for judges to issue a statement like this.
Yeah.
And I think it should serve as more than like a red flag that, you know, the current government in Alberta is acting in a way that is all too familiar and all too recognizable. So I think it's really important that all Canadians do start to familiarize themselves with our systems and how they work and why. And I really encourage anybody who, you know, has the spoons or the ability or the knowledge to do so to start. We need help educating people. The reality is that even if tomorrow the UCP was recalled, and there was, you know, maybe the NDP government was elected and the cuts to education were rectified, that we are going to need to make up for a lot of lost time when it comes to education and educating our public. And far too many people in Canada think that we operate the way that the United States does. And that's not true. We have very different systems in how we work. So
Yeah.
Super important.
I wanted to add something because I think that a lot of people aren't just in denial about the US invading Canada, but they're also in denial about like what is happening in Alberta, and a lot of people seem to think it isn't that serious and like, oh, it's just a small group of people, but it's very serious. And the fact that the courts put out a statement like that should tell us how serious it is. I think that the reason a lot of people are in denial is because in North America, specifically in Canada, we have never really experienced a threat like this before, especially from our literal neighbors and former allies. So I think it's hard for a lot of people to come to terms with the fact that this is real, it is happening, and we need to treat it like a real threat because it is a real threat.
I totally agree. I think it's really it's really interesting from the perspective of somebody like I remember the referendums in Quebec in like the 90s. And my family is from Quebec. I'm not from Quebec, but my family is from Quebec. So I think for me, the initial idea of it is like, oh, that'll never happen. Because even when Quebec was trying to separate, I never really feared that Quebec would successfully separate. There are so many other components that would stop it from happening. I think the difference with this is the tie to what's going on in the US and the fascism and the regime that's happening there. That is
Mhm.
so different than the situation with
Absolutely.
Quebec. I mean,
Oh
Quebec
yeah.
was founded in a different way. There's a different language, there's a different culture, all different things that go through the Quebec system. So that is more of like a has been since the 1600s trying to break away
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
isn't funny. I'm just saying like it's a long-term thing. Whereas with Alberta, I think as well for me, not just the fact that it's obviously treasonous and very disturbing that it's coming out of the States, but as somebody who I've grown up in BC, I'm from Ontario, I've grown up in BC, this is the first time I've heard of Albertans saying, like, well, the East hates us and all of this sort of weird rhetoric that I'm like, who's telling you this
Yeah.
stuff? I've never heard this in my life.
You know what? Because I have connected with a lot of people from, I would say, the quote prairie provinces, although, that's not entirely how one would describe Alberta. Um, I understand, like, emotionally the idea of Western alienation. And I do think that sometimes there's a tendency for more heavily populated areas to there are some attitudes that have been directed toward, let's say, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, and some lifestyle factors there. For example, like when EVs first became popular, obviously living in Vancouver, that's a totally different conversation about the ability to incorporate that into our daily life. We just realistically, because of our climate and because of the way our cities are laid out, that is much more easily implemented than in prairie provinces where realistically there just isn't public transit. It's not available to in the same way that it is in other places out east and specifically out west. And I know that as we all kind of went a little bit more online and we all connected a lot more across the country on social media, some of those attitudes did creep in. And you know what? There are some pretty shitty elitist attitudes towards Albertans. I think Canadians are just as guilty. Progressive Canadians are just as guilty of treating conservatives the way that we saw Democrats treat rural Republicans in some ways. And that didn't work out. The
Yeah.
Yeah,
approaches that they took
definitely.
didn't work out either. So, like, I definitely understand where some of the sentiment comes from. It's just that, when you couple that with, as you said, Kat, a very direct influence, and we're talking, well, I suspect there's a lot of money, and we'll probably learn more about it in the coming months. But the level of influence of a nation that has a population of 340 million, that is has entertainment media as their largest export. Like and quite frankly, all of the social media apps that we in Canada have enjoyed are primarily American. Like the level of influence is just next level. So it's definitely understandable when you combine all of these factors, how we got where we are today. Like it's no mystery, but that still doesn't change like the emotional experience. And it does still feel like, wait, this was kind of an issue, but now suddenly it's like, am I going to be able to
Mhm.
visit my family in Saskatchewan because I'm going over country Alberta airspace, i.e., American airspace?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
No, I won't even put that out there. Don't want to manifest that, but
yeah. Let's erase that from the universe because I don't want to think about it. But
yeah.
yeah, it's just very interesting to me as somebody who is like I've never spent any, I've driven through Alberta once when we moved from Ontario to BC, and I've never stopped back in the province since. So it's not like I have connection there. And I am definitely the person that you're talking about who's like, I don't talk to conservatives. So I have nothing to say to you. We like, that's generally not a group that I'm talking to a lot. So it's been very interesting for me to hear this whole like, well, nobody cares about the West because I don't even think of Alberta as the West. I think of Alberta as the prairies and everything west of the Rockies as the rest. So, yeah, it's just been very interesting. And I bet that's probably not uncommon around each of our provinces are so huge. So I'm assuming there's other places in Canada who are going like, what are you talking about? The beef that Ottawa has with you and they've been treating you terribly. What? So
Yeah, it's definitely like, I don't know, I feel a certain responsibility to at least try to bridge some of these chasms as somebody who moved from Saskatchewan to BC, because there is definitely a cultural shift. It was undeniable. I've been in BC for over a decade now, but having spent so much of my life in Saskatchewan and then moving here, a lot has shifted for me in my attitudes, in my understanding of things, and also it was interesting to see some of the attitudes toward like my home province that I encountered here for the first time. So yeah, I definitely feel like a responsibility to maybe advocate for a path forward that will hopefully not wind up in the same situation that has happened in the States, while also acknowledging that, things like these movements and literal treasonous acts do need to be addressed in a way that is, I would argue, less than compassionately.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, and that's something I have a lot of trouble with because I actually have a lot of family in Alberta. Um,
really.
a lot of family in Alberta, yeah, and unfortunately, I struggle with having compassion for them. They are all very Maple MAGA,
Oh,
Mm,
your
and
family. Yeah.
yeah, my family, like not like my cousins, second cousins, stuff like that. Not my immediate family. My immediate family is pretty great. But cousins, uncles, second cousins, a lot of them are in Alberta. I have a huge family, and just, I've tried having these conversations with them, and for me, it just hasn't really been productive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I've tried so hard and for so long, especially when Trump got elected. When he got elected and all the 51st state stuff started happening, I was having conversations with family members and it just got to a point where I mean I've made TikTok videos about this. I have gone no contact with the majority of my family. And it was a hard decision and it wasn't just because of, you know, um their views and stuff. It was, 1,000 cuts.
Mhm.
But I think the response that I had when I was speaking to them about these issues has made it so difficult for me to have compassion and to try and talk to them in a way that is productive. So I feel like I definitely need to work on that because, it is true. If we want to fix the issue, we're going to need to have tough conversations. We're going to need to educate and interact with them.
So yeah, Marta, like you said, we definitely are going to be needing to do a lot of hard conversations and things going forward. Bailey, are there any calls to action? Are there any like things that are going on the ground in Alberta that we need to know about that the rest of the Canada can be helping with?
Absolutely. So, first and foremost, it's really important that all Canadians understand that movements in Alberta do have an impact on the rest of us, for better or for worse. So, I would encourage all Canadians to at least tune into and follow Operation Total Recall. They're on Threads, Instagram, and TikTok at the very least. There are also individual accounts for the individual UCP members that they're trying to recall. And basically, this is a movement that is trying to use perfectly legal legislation that was actually ironically passed by the UCP government to recall these members of the UCP party and force another election for those individual ridings. Part of the reason it's really important to get involved with this, regardless of outcome, is it does require that communities in Alberta are starting to talk to each other. Because if you sign up as a volunteer or in your canvassing, you are talking to other Albertans in your community. And now more than ever, that is incredibly important. A huge part of why America has been so successful over these decades in, well, essentially lobbying towards stealing our resources in Canada is because they have had a monopoly on the ways that we communicate, right, through social media. So in-person communication is really, really important. So if you are in Alberta, I definitely encourage you to get involved if you haven't already. But also, if you're not in Alberta, just following these accounts and amplifying their message increases the chances that it will get to more people, including Albertans. Right? Because a lot of times, I mean, it's really easy to sort of just wash our hands of this if we don't live in Alberta. But you, Kat, might have some followers who are in Alberta who may not have known about this movement unless you shared about it. And same with you, Marta. So like, the more people that get involved, the better. And then also realistically, there are these movements, these separatist movements, are starting to gain traction in BC and Saskatchewan as well. So the reality is that we I know. There's a prosperity project for Facebook groups for both of those. Yeah. Anyway, point is, it's really important that we're strengthening our network, like progressives, but also just people in general. I saw a post the other day, and I thought it just was such a great reminder. You choose your friend group, but you don't choose your community. And whether we like it or not, like you live where you live, as do the other people around you. And you don't get to just say, well, screw those people, we don't claim you. Mm-hmm. Whether you claim them or not, they live near you and they're part of your community. So it's just really important that communities start talking. So that's a really important movement. Second thing, and well, arguably priority wise, is it potentially is the first most important, is amplifying the Indigenous voices of the people in Alberta. First of all, most of them are talking about this recall movement. But in addition to that, there are legal cases moving forward, because the reality is that Alberta lands do not belong to the people who are championing the separatist movement, right? These are Indigenous lands. So in listening to Indigenous voices and amplifying their voices is really, really important. And you can donate to help cover the cost of some of these legal battles. So for example, if you search Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation, you can contribute to legal efforts. It's a GoFundMe. Also following content creators online who are Indigenous, who are speaking out a lot about this. Native Calgarian, one of my favorites, Curious Leaf and also disability advocates, because that is another group that, it's a canary in a coal mine usually for fascism. So usually you'll find that disability advocates are the first ones to speak up when something of this nature is happening. And so Zachary Disability Advocate is based out of Alberta. And then also Marie Renaud, who is a representative in Alberta, and Janice Irwin. These are all people that have been very very vocal online, and they're really good at referring you back to tangible actions that you can take to help fight what's going on, fight fascism in Alberta.
In everywhere. Everywhere we can fight it.
And everywhere. And like you said, Marta, I mean, having those difficult conversations with friends and family, that is part of it. Realistically, I think that's a pretty, certainly not a unique experience, just not really getting very far. So it's important to remember that, like, you're not going to be able to get a lot of people to see what's going on, or to care what's going on. So sometimes you might have to just kind of call it and move on. And same with your online activity. Like, it is far more important that you block and don't engage with hateful rhetoric, than to try and get in a back and forth with, like a conservative influencer that has hundreds of thousands of followers who, makes money from their content and stuff. Like, that's probably not a good use of time, right? It's probably
definitely
more beneficial to literally
that'll only boost their content.
Yes, exactly. Like, when they're making money from connecting themselves to these groups, that's really difficult to compete with. So it genuinely is probably better to spend your time getting to know people when you're standing in line at the grocery store. Like, realistically.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I would say those are the main ones that jump out to me. But Kat and I are pretty active on Threads, so we can definitely try to keep you posted.
I need to make a Threads, and I definitely will.
There's a lot going on. It's fair. It's a lot of platforms.
My spoons have been so low, and I'm like, what am I even gonna post on Threads? I need to work on getting past this flare that I'm in. And
that's totally fair.
Yeah.
Both of you now have mentioned spoons, and I just want to take like a moment, because I know that there's probably a lot of people who aren't terminally online and don't know that term. And both Marta and Bailey are really amazing disability advocates. And I know that that term is not known by everyone necessarily who doesn't live online. So does one of you kind of want to explain what saying you have no spoons is, or where it came from?
Go for it, Marta.
So I don't know where it came from, but this is funny, because I was actually talking to a friend like a month or so ago. We were having a conversation and talking about, what we had been doing lately, and I was like, my spoons are really low, so I haven't been able to accomplish as much as I would want to accomplish. And she's like, "Oh." And I could see she was like really confused. And she's like, "What do you mean spoons? Like, you don't have spoons?" Or, and I was like, "Oh, okay. This is the part where people that aren't online and don't have disabilities are probably confused."
Mm-hmm.
Like, spoons are basically the energy that you have to complete tasks every day. Would you say that's like a good definition?
Yeah, I would say so. Like, spoons sort of represent units of energy, is how some people describe it. Yeah.
So low spoons would mean, okay, today is like a day where nothing is going to get done and I just need to rest. But then, the next day I might have enough spoons to make some videos and do some chores. Yeah, so that's what we mean when we're talking about spoons.
Yeah, I think it can be a little bit confusing too. And also, just as a side note for anybody listening, the three of us joke about cutlery in general, because Kat was unfamiliar with this term, so now she has always asked to check in, like, how's your cutlery? How many knives do you have? Do you need some forks? Part of the theory, which I just looked it up to confirm her name, it was coined by writer Christine Miserandino. Apologies on the pronunciation. Was that people with disabilities or chronic illnesses have more limited spoons. So we have fewer spoons, whereas people who don't experience disability or chronic illness have more spoons or even unlimited spoons. So just, as a disabled person, when you go about planning your day, you might, you just have fewer spoons to spend. And we don't know why it's spoons. Maybe it's something to do with silver. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah.
You gotta.
It's the new Alberta currency.
Spoons.
Sorry. Anyway, you were saying, Marta. I appreciated you mentioning that you were low on spoons. What is it? The war?
Yeah.
Is that taking from your spoons?
You know what? There's quite a few things, and that brings me to something I wanted to talk about, which is disability. More specifically, disability grief, and how that has intensified for me because of war. And I think that's the case for a lot of disabled people, at least the ones that I have spoken to. I mean, I've experienced disability grief for my entire life, really, because I've always had disabilities. But, this past year, it's really been like, it's intensified a lot. And so first, I guess I should probably say, like, what is disability grief? And I feel like this could be different for each person that experiences disability. But for me, it's like grieving, the life that I could have had, the things I could have accomplished by now, and experiences I could have had if it were not for my disabilities. And I'm not saying that people with disabilities can't accomplish like great things, because they absolutely can, and a part of Disability Pride Month in July is to highlight those accomplishments. But it is a lot more difficult, and there are so many barriers that disabled people face. And so I've had a lot of disability grief lately, and it's definitely intensified because of the war, especially since there's a lot of like new stress that has been added to my life. Like, for example, now I'm worrying about, okay, am I going to be able to have access to my medications that I literally need to survive? Or are there going to be shortages? Is there going to be supply chain issues? Am I going to be able to have the access that I have now to healthcare, or is that going to be disrupted? And so this is something that I've been worrying about a lot ever since, Trump got elected and the US started making these threats to invade.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've just been struggling with that a lot lately, and it's been all the stress actually causes, my conditions to worsen. So right now, I mean, you two know, and I've made videos about this, I've been having this really terrible POTS flare for, I don't know how long it's been. Like, I feel like it's been weeks at this point.
Yeah.
And the stress definitely isn't helping. And so that's another thing, stress has a huge impact on our bodies physically as well. And
absolutely.
So I think a lot of disabled people are very, very scared right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good of you to share this perspective, because I mean, we're your friends, and so obviously we talk to you about these kind of things as well. But I think being open about it is so important because I think there must be so many people who feel alone and afraid in this moment, and they
Yeah.
are also dealing with the regular grief that comes with disability grief of just moving through your daily life, amplified to this place of like, well, not only that, like, how am I going to fight this? What am I going to do?
Yeah.
And it sort of combines together to form I don't even know how you would describe it, like a bit of a doom cloud around you. But, you know,
Definitely. Yeah.
um,
And it also is like I get really upset because I'm like, am I going to be able to do enough? Am
mhm.
I going to be able to, help my neighbors, protect my neighbors? Or am I going, I don't want to say like, this is hard for me to say, but am I going to be a burden instead? That's something that's been on my mind because, I think a lot of people with disabilities experience internalized ableism. And that's something I've also been struggling with a lot lately because I haven't really been able to do anything. I've been mostly laying down and in bed recently. And so I have this feeling of, oh, am I going to be a burden? Am I going to be somebody that is holding people back when I should be fighting, I should be helping? And it makes me feel, a lot of guilt, makes me feel like a burden. And I just want to say these are my personal feelings. People with disabilities are not a burden. Um, but I think because we live in a society that basically values work and productivity over literally everything else,
Yeah.
people's worth is often measured by their ability to work, the accomplishments that they have. And so, I mean, right now I'm not really able to work. I'm not really able to do a lot of anything. And so I feel this guilt. I feel this internalized ableism, and I know that I shouldn't, but, it's capitalism.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that late stage capitalism is a real bitch for all of us, to be honest,
Yeah,
you know?
Well,
And it really first of all, obviously, we would never think of you as a burden or any other disabled people, but I do validate that you're feeling that, and it must
yeah,
be so um taxing to be seeing headlines and everything else, and also going through this, wanting to stay informed, but knowing that it's potentially aggravating conditions that you already live with.
yeah,
But I will say that, there, I think oftentimes we think of, especially because we are using the word war, we've used the word treason, like these big, heavy words, and they have very real actions that come with them. I think when we sometimes think of war, we think of it in the terms of like movies. If we haven't lived through it, like in North America, we often are seeing it through the
yeah,
lens of, ships and tanks and bombs and troops. But in every conflict around the world, no matter how it's happening, there are still people living their lives, and there are all different ways that they contribute to forms of resistance. And so I think sometimes people think, can I physically fight? But there's also, we think of the journalists. I'm biased, but we think of the journalists, we think of the
yeah,
photographers, the people who documented the history, the people who were witness. Those people are also very important. Communications in general, just making sure you're talking within your community, doing any sort of organizing that you can, as Bailey was talking about earlier, those are also part of those efforts. Those are also a way to defend ourselves. Not every person is going to be suited to be at the front lines of something if that happens, but there's so many other ways that every person can be useful, and I think we need to sort of look at the kaleidoscope of different people within this country and realize that all of us are going to have to figure out what makes us unique and how we can help.
Yeah.
I don't know if that lessens, I'm sure that doesn't really lessen any of the grief that you're experiencing, though. I
No, it
think.
it definitely does. Because logically I know these things, but emotionally it's like also because, I have a mood disorder, I have bipolar disorder. So emotions are often something that kind of take the lead, instead of logical thinking for me.
To be fair, I think even if you didn't have bipolar, as someone who doesn't have bipolar, it's a
Yeah.
real emotional time, Marta.
Yeah, definitely.
Emotions be everywhere right now, so
Yeah.
go easy on yourself a little bit there.
Yeah, I mean, not to tie it back too much, because we don't need to talk about Alberta forever. But an important thing to keep in mind is that, part of why, at least for me, this is so triggering, it's really difficult to experience, is that um, a huge component of fascism is hijacking emotions
Yeah.
and doing things that heighten those emotions, making them easier to hijack. So um, we are and have been for a very long time. That's another part of it, right? Through media, through social media.
Mhm.
This has been a long haul, and um, we've been in some ways under attack for a very long time. Our nervous systems have been systematically worn down in ways that do make us less effective, right?
Yeah.
And then also part of the unique experience of being disabled at this time is that we are coming off of this mass disabling event, which obviously
Yeah.
was the pandemic, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I know that, at least for me, as I was watching, because I became disabled shortly before the pandemic, actually. So I was starting to move through a lot of, like, disability, like denial, having a really hard time adjusting to, like a different way of moving through my day and stuff like that. It was almost validating when the pandemic happened, because it was like, oh, okay, other people are starting to, like, they're starting to get it, right?
Yeah.
Because other people are becoming disabled, but also because an event like that really highlighted a lot of ableism and a lot of the ableism that's built into not only us as individuals, but like our structures, right? And so
Definitely.
it was like, it was encouraging to see, suddenly we're working from home, we're keeping these things in mind. We are, a lot of people, waking up to how we treat disabled people. And I think it was very, I felt pretty hopeful, especially after the vaccine came out. And it just felt like there was this path forward together. And I mean, I don't think it's any coincidence, based on history and how these things go, that usually following these mass disabling events, we do find a rise in fascism. That is a pattern that we are seeing kind of consistently repeat through history. And part of the unique pain of being a disabled person at this time is, here we are at the place we're at, as disabled people, being like, yeah, we were telling you guys. We
Yeah.
were telling you, we were screaming it. Like, we literally couldn't be louder. We thought we had all the support from you. We thought that everybody was like, hey, I get it, I understand, like, let's keep this in mind as we move forward. But the reality is, like, we had these systems in place, and obviously capitalism pushes us to, return to normal and kind of forget all of those learnings that we took from
Mm.
Oh,
it.
yeah.
So there's like a
100%.
unique grief and a unique anger and a lot of emotions, at least for me personally, that have come up at this time. So I really appreciate you, sharing that, because I do think it is really, really important. And I think a lot of people who are not disabled can also probably relate to what you're
Yeah.
saying. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. And yeah, like I mean, I hope I made sense because like I have posted like my brain is like really foggy right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Bailey, you said fascism uses fear. And I wanted to talk about um Trump actually using that because he recently was talking about bringing back quote mental institutions and quote insane asylums. And I think when a lot of people that I have talked to about this, they're like, "Oh, that's not going to happen." And they haven't been taking it seriously, but I think that people that are disabled and people that are friends with disabled people are taking it very seriously, because that is terrifying for us to hear, knowing the
Mm-hmm.
history of how those institutions have been run and who has been placed in those institutions in the past. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
because this isn't like, people were placed in there for being queer or,
Mm-hmm.
people of color, women who may have upset their husbands.
Yeah.
These places were were dangerous. The conditions were horrific and there was so much abuse that occurred and was covered up. And so hearing him say those words is scary. It's very scary. And the
Yeah.
fact that a lot of people are in denial and they're like, "Oh, he's just saying that. He's not gonna do it." It's a little bit infuriating because he very well could do it. He's done a lot of things that people didn't think he would ever do.
Oh yeah, like we need to take this seriously when
Yeah.
we take him at his word, I think is the takeaway from
Yeah.
2025.
And
Or
If
that should
also,
be.
anyone, Canadians know best, please take him at
Yeah.
his word. We've been telling you. But I know that like it isn't just his word. This was an executive order that they made
yeah.
so long ago. I could go back and find it. But they made this executive order that was very specific and it even tied it to homeless people as well that they were planning to put in
Yeah.
these asylums and institutions. So they're not it's a very large swath of the population that could end
Mhm.
up in whatever they choose to deem as these places.
And I'm assuming that they would probably be very close to what these ICE detention centers are like. And we've heard horrific stories coming out of those places.
Mhm.
And so I think that that's contributing a lot to the grief I'm experiencing, the disability grief specifically. And also the fact that he called them insane asylums, like, oh, I don't know, just
We don't say that anymore, right?
Yeah.
no, we don't, and it hurts, Um, and I'm scared. I'm scared about that.
I think
Yeah.
I mean it's valid. It's very valid fear. It's funny too because even I think a lot of people who would consider themselves to be progressive don't necessarily always have a good understanding of the significance and the history of institutions like this. I think for some
Yeah.
people, they saw, well, maybe not calling them insane asylums, but they might see these hospitals or these centers or whatever as a sort of an option for people who are struggling with mental health or with
Mhm.
addiction issues who they don't want to see, go into the justice system, right? Because that's not helpful. So
Yeah.
this is an alternative, right? Like if you are harming others as a result of, your personal health, well, let's send you here. So, you know, it is forced. It's mandated
Yeah.
because you did do crimes, but like this will at least help you get better. Sure, ideally, maybe that conceptually that might make sense to a lot of people, but it's just like you said, you need to refer back to the history, and like
Yeah.
historically what consistently happens is that, you know, first of all, it's not exactly healthcare that a lot of people are receiving, right? Or
No.
not the kind of healthcare that is going to have a term positive impact on individuals and on society, etc. Also, you know, not only not getting help, but specifically causing harm. Um,
Yes.
and then on top of it, it is, you know, like with fascism, the term disability is can change. Like you said,
Yeah.
disability one day might, you know, include the DSM-5, but then the next day it's like, oh, well, you know, Kat suffers from Trump derangement syndrome. So, right? So it's
Yeah.
like it's really, really important that we're aware of that now. Um,
Mhm.
and sorry, yeah, I don't want to
No, I think it's
jump on
such a
what
good
you're
point.
saying.
No, that's a great point, Bailey. Like, um, because I definitely see them changing the definition. And
Mhm.
also, I don't think any of us here believe that Trump actually cares about
No,
people
No.
that are experiencing mental health issues. Um, I think that this is a way that he wants to, have more control over the people.
I
Can
think
I please? Oh,
also
sorry.
no, I was just going to say, I think there's also such a big difference between like in the province of BC right now, we've been dealing with this like forced, I don't remember the term that they're using in BC, but essentially people who have been committing a lot of property crimes and
Mhm.
violent crimes and drug inflicted crimes that are happening in BC, they're forcing them into certain types of institutions, into like a
Yeah.
forced rehab situation. And that is not that people can debate whether or not that's a good idea or a bad idea, but that is not the same kind of program as like what they are proposing in the US that is
Yeah.
tied into fascism, that also is tied into a lot of conspiracy theories because Robert Kennedy Jr. was the one who was championing this with his Maha movement, and he was talking about like putting people into these institutions to take them off of their medication. he wants
Oof.
to he wants to take away medication for ADHD and depression and make people like recover naturally. And I think it's a very different distinction to say like, yes, what Bailey was saying, like some people maybe in the best intentions are trying to
Mhm.
find a way so that repeat offenders might have a path forward to rehabilitation. This is not rehabilitation, this is punishment, this is the othering. And when we talk about, you know, the Trump derangement syndrome is kind of a, it makes me laugh, but also what if they decide women who can't have children should be in those institutions?
Or unmarried women, you know?
Right. And we
Uh,
do know, like you said about the queer people, like here in Riverview in BC, there was a lot of people who were queer who were locked up in
yeah.
our hospitals.
And I also just want to mention, because I have personal experience with this, I've, been in a psychiatric ward, uh, against my will, because I mean, we should probably put a trigger warning here, because, I was a danger to myself. And it's it's very different than what they're proposing in the US. I was able to, get the help that I needed there. I was able to have access to counseling, to psychiatrists. I was able to get on the right medication that I am on now. And, you know, I will say it probably saved my life. And these, psychiatric wards are not perfect. There is a lot of work that needs to be done there, because, there still is unfortunately, there are harmful things that can happen to people while they are in those spaces. But I agree with you, Kat. There's a huge difference between, you know, helping people that are going through a mental health crisis, and locking people up because, they don't agree with your with the government, or, they've said something controversial, or they're
Yeah.
part of a marginalized community, because those are the people that would be affected most by this, vulnerable people, people that are a part of marginalized communities.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also important to note that, with our current structures, um, I mean, when it comes to disability, I would argue that what we do have as it stands is fascism light. I think a lot of
Yeah.
Indigenous peoples would agree. A lot of disabled people also see that, just because the way we move through these systems is different. And I think it's important for people to know that the infrastructure is already there.
Yeah.
Um, like even, when we're talking about a path forward to like, and not to be super bleak, but camps in the way that we understand them from history, we already have a path toward that, and
Mhm.
so it's more so a matter of fanning a flame and moving forward down that path at a faster speed than, than having to build it in the first place. Like the pipeline, the infrastructure is there, and it's just a
Yeah.
matter of turning on the tap. And so already, as it stands, disabled people, indigenous peoples understand that the faith that we have in our government is it is just that faith, because the reality is that the way things are set up, it can always go south for any one of us at any time. And human rights are already being suspended when it comes to certain aspects of daily life for people who are Indigenous, for people who are disabled. We might have good experiences moving through these systems, like a lot of people, especially white people, might have good experiences moving through the system. But
Definitely.
yeah, but these systems are so easily bastardized, and we can't depend on like the benevolence of a government that cares about people or prioritizes people.
Mhm.
And I really do think it's important that Canadians are aware of the fact that we do already have like a pretty paved road toward what is happening in the States. um, we have some more safeguards in place, and I think those are really, really important to protect. But then again, we also have, we're neighboring, like I said, extreme influence, that just by sheer numbers kind of outdoes us, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, just something to keep in mind always, when, especially when we do talk about disability, um, and something as specific as like these quote unquote insane asylums and holds, is that what is happening in BC, these are the little signs, right? This is like how it starts. These are the mumblings that we hear. It's mostly marginalized people that are impacted right now, but come 10 years down the road, it might look a little more similarly to what we're seeing south of the border. So
And I
Yeah,
agree. I
and
think
Evie says hello. Evie is my cat. So if you hear her crying in the background, that is, yeah, it's a cat. It's also me crying about the state of the world, but
I think tears aside about the crying of the state of the world. I think also it's just really good to this everything that's been going on, not just here, but in the US, has very much made it clear to me that we need to keep our eye on the democracy. Like we can't ever take our freedoms for granted. We have to, not everybody needs to be an activist in every single day and every single thing they're doing all the time. but you need to clock in. You need to be a good citizen. The way that the country is run is important from the provincial level, the municipal level, the federal level, and things like, yes, like that program in BC. We keep an eye on it. Like we know what's happening right
Mhm.
now, and maybe some people are vocally opposed, and maybe it's people who aren't vocally opposed who are kind of like, let's see if this works and cuts down on some of the violence that we're seeing in Vancouver, but you keep an eye on it. And I think being ready to call out politicians, I mean, today I was posting about David Eby saying, like, great job for calling out the treason. Yesterday, I was like, but we're not doing pipelines, right? So, like,
Saw
Yeah.
that.
I think
Yes.
making sure we are engaged, and you don't have to be maybe at the level that the three of us are, but paying attention. And even if it's just this like once a week chat with your friends, kind of like we're doing now, um, I think it's important to keep just one eye at least, if not both eyes in a situation like right now, on all of these other little activities to try to progress them forward and make sure they don't slip back. A lot of the Americans that I've talked to who are saying like, but this just happened with Trump just this year. And I'm like, well, it's been happening since Nixon,
Yeah.
You've watched your freedoms erode, you've watched your education erode, you've taken away your arts programs, you've allowed gun proliferation throughout your country, mass shootings. Like there has been steps towards this for many, many, many years. And we want to make sure we're not that, the metaphor that everybody talks about, the frog in the boiling pot of water. So I think keeping an eye on our democracy is very key right now.
And I think like one
Yeah.
thing that does help a lot with that is sort of fighting against the team sports mentality, which again, people in power are very much encouraging, using
Mhm.
to our disadvantage. But, like you said, EB's our premier. And overall, we might agree with a lot of the decisions he makes, or we might not agree with a lot of the decisions he makes. But you have to look at each individual decision and comment and act on those individual decisions rather than sitting back and being like, well, you know what? The NDPs, they got it for right now.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
I think progressives are also incredibly guilty of that. Like it's not just conservatives that are like, yeah, team blue,
Mhm.
right? I think sometimes there is a tendency for progressives to say, well, did the hard work, I voted them in, things are going to
Yeah.
be great. But I have been pretty encouraged to see a lot of people calling out the federal government based on individual actions. I really appreciate content creators, especially like political content creators, who do comment on individual decisions rather than just making blanket statements about an individual. I think that's really helpful. I think that moves. I think that's something that contributes to a lot of really positive change. So
Mhm.
I agree.
yeah.
And I wanted to just circle back really quick, to, talking about, healthcare,
Yes. Yeah.
uh, because I wanted to just clarify my experience as a white woman in the healthcare system, is going to be so different from the experiences of Indigenous women going through the healthcare system because there is
Mhm.
so much medical neglect that they experience.
Mhm.
And I've had horrible experiences. I think every disabled person, any person with a chronic illness has
Any
had
woman?
horrible experiences. Yes, especially women, but especially Indigenous women.
Mhm.
And I think it's so important to point that out because they've been speaking about this for a long time. And so I think that it's just another reason why we really need to listen to Indigenous voices at this time,
Mhm.
because, they're usually the first ones to point out, hey, this is happening, this is a problem.
Yeah, definitely.
I think a lot of it's really easy, and I recognize this in myself. it's really easy in time of crisis to kind of I mean, and we're going from crisis to crisis to crisis. It does get you sort of in a certain mindset. Reconciliation and some of the hard work almost feels like it's like secondary, or oh, that's something we do when things are calm and quiet. The reality is no, like that there's no better time than now to, like, if you haven't been listening to Indigenous voices, now's the time. If you haven't been listening to disabled voices, now's the time. But yeah, I mean, I definitely I struggle with that, because obviously when you experience this level of like nervous system dysregulation, it is really easy to just get like especially when you're talking about the invasion of Canada, it's really easy to be like almost become borderline xenophobic, which which, and again, they're kind of banking on that as well, and so I recognize that in myself. That's something that I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, I can imagine that Indigenous peoples felt that way when we colonized the fuck out of these lands. So like, let me just take a step back and kind of like come back to some of the decolonization work that we're all trying to do within our minds. So Kat, I know you're putting this on YouTube, but I would love like a call to, if you, in the comments, if you guys could name some of your favorite Indigenous content creators, and it doesn't have to just be people who are speaking up about what's happening in Alberta, but just like in general, I think would just
mm-hmm. I would say one of the ones, if anybody is watching who also has TikTok, I really love Hatch. It's spelled H8TCH, specifically because he's in the Arctic, in Northwest Territories. And I feel like the North is not a region that we ever give enough attention to. And he's become very interested and active about the NDP race. Because he was saying, I believe recently he had a video saying that we don't get a lot of say what happens in the whole of federal politics, but deciding who leads one party is something that I can actually do and be active in. So I found it really interesting. But yeah, absolutely. Leave below in the comments who your favorite Indigenous creators are and people that we should be following. Also, where to find them if it's not on YouTube, or if it is, where to find them. That would be really helpful for everybody. Yeah, so there has been a lot going on this week, and we've gone through Marta and Bailey. You brought like great chats. This is the whole reason I wanted to do this with you guys, because I knew that you would have such really interesting things to say and talk about. And honestly, we're gonna get carpal tunnel with the amount that we're texting, so then we don't need to add that to our problems. So I figured like a weekly chat with us would be great. My issue for the week, and as much as I want to just chat heated rivalry, because I did see that Hudson Williams was on a red carpet with Mark Carney tonight.
Yes. Yay!
So Hudson shout Williams. Out to Canadian content. As much as that should be what we're talking about, my issue of the week is not going to be maybe as heavy as war, treason, disability, and grief. But on the flip side of that, have you guys been following what is going on with Hootsuite?
I had no idea who Hootsuite even was until Kat informed me about this, because I get my breaking news from Kat. I like it that way, because I think receiving it from a friend is, a little easier on the nervous system.
Yeah, I mean, I do this for my family as well, because I get all the breaking news alerts, and then they'll see me just kind of go like, oh shit. And then I sort of read it through and go like, okay, this is the part that you need to know. And the rest of it, just like, don't worry about that right now.
Me sending you the unverified stuff.
Yeah.
I'm always like, Kat, there are whispers of this thing. There are no official sources, but just a heads up.
Yeah. So I get, and you're not the only one. I get a lot of people being like, "Is this true?" And it's me going like, "That's AI. That's real. This is from last year." Um, but yeah, the and to clarify, I'm not a journalist. I'm just a fan of the news. So, but yeah, the Hootsuite thing. So a lot of people, I've been talking about this all week, and really got exposed with a piece that they did in the Globe and Mail. They've actually, the reporters there have been carrying on with this story all week long. I think there's 4 or 5 articles out now. Hootsuite, if you do not know, for anybody who is not from Vancouver, because I think probably Vancouver-based people know them the most, is a social media marketing management company. So essentially, they started in 2008 in Vancouver, and they are the darling of the Vancouver tech scene because it was the first, like, you bring your dog to work, cool vibes kind of version of tech in Vancouver. And for a long time, they were huge. What they do is it's like a initially it started out as if you have a brand on a whole bunch of different platforms and you need to be able to schedule out all your content, they sort of created that interface so that you could like post to Twitter and post to YouTube and Facebook and everything all at once. And throughout time, they sort of also got into like figuring out your metrics and how you're doing and how your audience receives you. And they became this company that manages the social media, not just for individuals. There's a lot of small companies that use it. I know that somebody in my comment section was saying he has a barbershop and Google kind of just recommended that he used Hootsuite. So he went with it. And it was like, I don't know, $5 a month for this feature, and he's canceled it since. But this company has become so integral to like many huge corporations because you can imagine they have all these brand deals that are going out or ads for themselves and everything else that they need to be rolling out. And it would be a lot to manage that. So that's the firm that does it. But they really shot themselves in the foot this week, over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
And it's been really interesting to see the reaction to this. Basically, the Globe Mail broke the story that Hootsuite was working with ICE in the US, and they already had contracts with DHS. And back in 2020, the same company, Hootsuite, had taken a contract with ICE and gotten so much blowback that they immediately canceled it. They were like, oh, okay, the public doesn't want this. And it was a different CEO at the time. Then it's come out in this Globe and Mail article that last September, Hootsuite took another pilot contract with ICE for $95,000. And their sales reps are going on LinkedIn and being like, oh my God, America's great, the greatest country in the world. Can't wait to work with them. And they are promoting and being excited about ICE. Even more, they are sending representatives down to Washington to meet with them, and talk about what they can do together. And one of the interesting pieces in this article was that they were using a company that they had acquired called Talkwater. And Talkwater does social listening, which is a thing that they're really into right now. And basically, it can go through the whole of the internet and all the like forums, like Reddit forums, YouTube comment sections, posts that are being made, and sort of get a good grasp as to how your brand is coming across. And the way that it was pitched in a call to the ICE officials was that they would be able to create a real-time dashboard of how ICE was being talked about on the internet during live raids. I believe it was a raid in like Chicago that we're talking about at the time, that they would be able to, during an ICE raid, get a picture of who was talking about them and then geolocate the data down to the street level with a real-time dashboard.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
not
that's bad.
great. And they were bragging about it. Like this wasn't even like ICE asked for this to happen. This was Hootsuite being like, we could do this for you.
My goodness.
So, but the craziest part for me in all of this is this became public, and it became public through the Globe and Mail because employees came forward and were like, we're not cool with this. And they spoke anonymously to the Globe and Mail, and they released some information about calls and internal memos and everything else. But the follow-ups to this have been that the CEO basically just came out, not even basically, I'll put the official quote up here somewhere, but she said like, yeah, we're going to keep working with them. Like she said, I think what she said was, we're not doing anything wrong and we're going to keep working with them. And every time that the story progressed, it just kept being the same CEO being like, right, but we're going to keep working with them. And the latest one that happened that came out said like, we feel really bad about what's going on with people right now in the US. Anyway, we're going to continue our contract with
Oh
ICE.
my gosh.
I was like, oh, girl, you could have fixed this so many times. Um, and so for me, it's been highlighting something called collaborationism, where basically you already have these people who are ready to work with a regime that's about to take you over. We saw this in occupied France, Vichy France, where they were collaborationists with the Nazis. And I'm not saying that that's what this is happening here, but I am saying like when we have our own companies in Canada who are actively not just working with on existing contracts, but pursuing new seven-figure deals with ICE. It's mind-blowing to me. There's also a company out of Ontario that in December, Doug Ford was talking about how they had just received a big contract for armored vehicles. I think their name is Rochelle, Roshel. Um, and I
Ooh,
know a
yeah.
lot of people are really concerned about that as well. Rochelle so far has not come out with multiple statements being like, we're not doing anything wrong that I've seen. But it's just the tone deafness that the CEO keeps pushing forward that has been really striking to me. Um, and I did talk about it on multiple different social media apps. I also mentioned some of the companies that were listed on the Hootsuite website. And to their credit, I will say that IKEA Canada was listed as a client. And they immediately followed up with me to say, like, we are not working with them. This does not align with our values. And not only that, we have now flagged that we're on their website. We're going to talk to them about that.
Yay.
So,
That's
yay
good.
for still having vegan hot dogs.
I think I think that speaks a lot to how in Canada we have really given over so many of our industries to the United States over the years. And
Yeah.
again, that happens. We have such a huge there's such a big difference in the size of our populations. So it makes sense for so many of our businesses to seek that American market, especially social media, right? Because, when you're talking about individual users and their data, that makes sense, right? But I think I wouldn't be surprised if, through all this, and I'm kind of hopeful that this is the case, that because I do see people already identifying this as an issue, I think there's a great opportunity for a lot of tech innovation in Canada. I'm hopeful that some of the quote AI innovation that the federal government is speaking about is not necessarily going to be like the AI overview that we're seeing in our apps, but actually because there is physical AI, which is meaningful and important, and I think does have a role to play in us becoming, I don't know, just bringing us into the future and quite honestly into the present when it comes to technology, that other countries across the world are experiencing the benefits of. But it's just like it's almost like the film industry to me. Our tech industry here in Canada is just so American centric that it's come to a point where we're sort of existing as an arm to service them rather than to serve Canadian interests, which this obviously goes against in all of the ways. There's not one way that this is in any way aligning with Canadian interests aside from, that initial money that they would be receiving from the contract. But I think there's opportunity there, and I'm like hopeful of the future, but it's so discouraging to see this, like, and you just know that they are in a situation where they feel they need to take it too.
Yeah.
Right.
I think so. They've been struggling. The pieces have said they've been struggling financially.
Yeah.
It's very. There was a second story that came out right on the heels of this, of the Hootsuite thing, and that had to do with Jim Pattison Group and a warehouse out of ICE. Now, I will say I followed this whole story all the way through. and there was some misinformation that was going on, or at least people not reading the full story, maybe is a good way to put that. But essentially, what happened was Jim Pattison owns a bunch of car dealerships and media corporations, and also a bunch of grocery chains here in the West. And they also own a ton of property. They are, throughout North America, Canada, and the US, they own a lot of property. And they had received a proposal from what was pitched to them as a government contractor who wanted to obtain a warehouse that they own in Hanover County, Virginia. And initially, the story came out saying like Hanover had been made aware of this and it's going to be an ICE detention facility. And Jim Pattison was the one that owned it. And there wasn't much more information about that. And I had a lot of people get in contact with me saying, like, I actually know people who work in Jim Pattison and they didn't know that this was going on. And the company has since come out and clarified to say, like, it's not that ICE approached us. Department of Homeland Security did not approach us. But after the fact and the sale was going through, this government contractor was revealed to be ICE detention center. They did not know ahead of time, is what their statement has been, their public statement.
This is just a quick update from me while editing later. There has been an update from Jim Pattison. They have come out and said they are absolutely not going to sell the warehouse to DHS and ICE. They provided a one-sentence statement, but they are very clear on that. So just an update from the future.
And I think there's such a difference as we navigate through this whole like detangling of Canada's industry from the US that I think we're going to be seeing. I feel like there's such a difference between what Hootsuite is doing of saying like, absolutely, we're going to still pursue this business. We don't care that it's with ICE, and we're giving them tools to enact fascism, essentially, is how the public is taking it and is kind of what's happening. But there's a difference between that and someone like a giant conglomerate that owns property who a subsidiary didn't know that this was being sold off. I've seen so many people come out and be like, boycott him, boycott all of the grocery stores that he owns. And it's really difficult because like those grocery store workers need jobs. I know Save on Foods has been doing throughout the whole last year with everything going on with tariffs. They've been doing $1.49 Tuesdays. And I'm going to be honest, there's been times that I need to take advantage of the $1.49 Tuesday deals. They've really helped a lot of people who are struggling. And it's not as easy to detangle from a grocery store because a property was sold under a conglomerate that didn't know it was going to be used for that purpose versus someone directly being like, absolutely, not only that, we're making social media posts saying that we love working with ICE. Like, I think those are quite different. Maybe it's just like me. Do you find the nuance between those two? I don't know if I'm being too easy on them, but
I agree. And I think that whenever people talk about boycotting grocery stores specifically, we need to remember that is a privilege. I live in Ontario. There are a lot of small towns around here where there is only like one or two options for grocery stores, and people that are struggling, they can't really afford to boycott. So I think we need to keep that in mind. And whenever we're talking about, boycotting specifically places where you buy food, which every human needs, there definitely needs to be some nuance there, and there needs to be a conversation where people say, hey, we know not everyone is able to do this. So don't feel bad if you can't, because not everyone has the privilege to go to a grocery store that is like less problematic.
Yeah, I think for me, my concern is I definitely don't want to see Canadians turning to American corporations as an alternative to boycott, right? Because that almost seems like antithetical. It's like, okay, we're boycotting this Canadian owned grocery store because it sold property to the American fascist regime, in essence, right? So then I'm going to shop at an American corporate. It doesn't make sense, right? America is, what is it? 5 corporations. That is America.
That's a great point.
That is who, in essence, like even when you're talking about like general strikes and stuff like that, it's not even necessarily that you're boycotting like the American government. It is, you need to activate the kill switch for the corporations that have taken over your country, and to be quite honest, a lot of Canada as well. So that's my main concern with that, is just I don't want to see people turn to American alternatives. I also have, concerns for people, like you said, Marta, who are disabled. And again, sometimes, especially with food, like we have to be aware of the privilege of boycotting certain chains, especially because there are food deserts in Canada. But that being said, I am always excited by Canadians really starting to have these not only conversations, but picking up momentum and building networks so that we are able to hopefully take action against these big Canadian corporations, because we have the same issue here too. We have several corporations that have essentially monopolized these vital services. And I do think that we need to stop apologizing for them and take meaningful action. I also saw that Avi Lewis, who's running for NDP leadership, he's been talking about having publicly owned grocery stores. I think that would be a huge step forward.
That would be so good.
Really excited about that idea. I'm sure that only the NDP will run on that, but it would be really cool if, we put enough pressure on all of them that it was kind of like, in order to stay competitive with each other, they all had to start thinking that maybe that was something that they would need to make possible. And I do think that realistically, some boycotts and a general strike more than likely will be required on that path in order to make that happen one way or another.
Yeah.
Even if we voted in the NDP next election, I still think that realistically, Canadians do have to prepare for the fact that we need to take some of the action that we're asking Americans to take against their corporations.
Definitely.
I think for me, as far as boycotts go, especially specifically when it comes to food, but other things as well, I take the view of like, I try to actively promote Canadian. So I try to highlight and lift up Canadian brands, because I don't want to guilt people who might not be in a financial place to be able to boycott or not have options or anything else. So for me, I'm like, okay, I'm going to shout out as many Canadian businesses as I can and talk about them actively and promote them and say how great they are, just so people know that there are options out there. But this idea of like a public grocery chain is so good. I've been following back in 2023, Minister Champagne, ironic name, for when he was being put in charge of groceries, was trying to break up the grocery monopolies in Canada. And he had the mandate where he reached out to like Lidl and Aldi and a bunch of chains throughout Europe, trying to bring them in as competition. And as far as I know, that kind of, they did an intensive process for about a year, but the grocery chains from Europe were like, you guys have kind of like a monopoly situation, and it's going to be hard for us to like break into that right now. So I don't think they were that interested. So if we could come up with a public option, that would be amazing.
I definitely think we need to put a lot of pressure on the government, let them know we want this. We do. And, hopefully this is something that could possibly happen in the future.
Yeah,
Definitely,
I mean, I could
take some time.
Yeah, and I could see it stemming from like in BC, we have something called Buy BC. And I think they already highlight those in a lot of grocery chains. I think if they like took the Buy BC idea, and now that we've broken down a lot of the interprovincial trade barriers and turned it into like this store sells Canadian products, even like started at that level, might be a way to build out, like, this is Canadian produce, this is from our, small businesses, and build it up from there might be an interesting way to go. Yeah, so that is our three news stories of the week. And we realized ahead of time that maybe each thing that we're going to need to process and go through with each other might not be the most uplifting segments, and figured
Yeah.
that we should send you on your way with a little bit of something happy. So, and a little bit of a call to action, a thing that you can do. So, we have our first official segment for 49 clicks. I feel like I have not mentioned the name of this podcast that we're doing at all. But our ending segment for the week is going to be what we call Hots and Bots. I feel like I need one of those like sound effects. Hots and Bots is a segment in which, number one, we allow Bailey to talk about her favorite subject, which is bots on the internet and why we need to block them in order to keep democracy. And then we will talk about Hots. Hots being the hot ass Canadians that we have found this week. So, Bailey, you have the floor. Please tell us what we should be watching out for, what trends you've seen. What is the bot report?
Okay, well, first of all, for anybody who's maybe not even aware that that's a problem or a thing, I would say if you are an individual who is active on the internet, active on social media, listening to this podcast, you might not be aware of the fact that having accounts that are artificial in your following, engaging with your content, it's not helpful. Not only is it not helpful for your own personal engagement and like capitalist endeavors, but it can be very specifically harmful to our democracy because, and I'm sure, many people are aware now that foreign interference is a very valid concern. Canada did find that in the election, we were experiencing a lot of that online. And now, very recently, we have actually we're identifying the United States as the primary threat of foreign interference online. And they, of course, own all the social media platforms, right? So it is, I cannot overstate how important it is to regularly go through your following, go through your feed, your pages, and make sure that you are engaging with people who are actually people. And I know that's hard to identify initially. So some of my tips would be, when somebody does follow you on social media, go to their page. Just take a look around. Like, are they posting, are they posting an individual's face? Are they posting videos of what appears to be themselves, like talking about things? Is that consistent throughout the whole page? Like, is it the same individual, or is that account just reposting content and not creating any content of its own, right? That's kind of something to look out for, keep an eye on. And then also the following count, right? If you have an account following you that is following like thousands and thousands of accounts and has a very low follower count, that's also a little bit suspect, especially if you combine that with, the fact that they're not posting their own individual content. Another thing is, and it's kind of funny, but like a lot of porn bots are concerned because even though it might seem relatively harmless, right? You're just like, okay, well, whatever, it's a porn bot. It could be a real individual who's just like trying to sell OnlyFans content or something. The reality is that one common tactic is to create accounts like that are likely to get follows, likely to get engagement, likely to be subconsciously written off, and then gain a bunch of followers and then switch over to, whatever the intended purpose is. So if that's influencing elections by promoting certain type of political content, that's something to watch out for. So I would definitely recommend, if you have accounts like that following you, do block them right away. You can also report them. It's hit or miss whether or not that's going to have an impact. Again, these platforms are oftentimes benefiting from artificial accounts. So it's most important that you block so that they're unable to engage, and you don't legitimize them through engagement. Mm-hmm. That's kind of my overview. That's my spiel. If anybody wants to look at it as like homework for the week, I would say like a good way to start is just go through your following. And ultimately, at the end of the day, remember that democracy and meaningful community with real people is always going to be more important than following. The friends that you have been making and connecting with online, make sure that you have another way to contact them, another way to connect with them.
Yeah.
I think it's especially important that we do start getting the phone numbers of close friends. Always be very careful who you're giving your information to. Moving to apps that are not American owned, and just having a few avenues to connect with your community. And it's cliche, I've said it a million times and a bunch of people say it online, but connect with that in-person community. Get to know your neighbor, get to know the people at your closest retail store, at your nearest coffee shop. Like, just start with those little in-passing conversations, just trying to connect with people.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I also will give a shout out to Canada Post. Letter writing is still a thing, guys. Write a letter, send it to a person. That is also another way to connect with each other.
And on that note, Kat,
this is not a time to plug.
I think so.
It's always a time.
It's always
a time to plug.
It's your podcast. You're allowed.
Okay, fine. I have a project that I'm doing that's called Evergreen Post. It comes out every month on the first of the month. You can find all the information at catornet.com. It's $12 Canadian. That includes shipping to anywhere in the world. And basically, it is a way for people to get offline. It's every month you get a letter, you get a art print, a photograph from me, and then you get some recommendations about other things that you can do, movies, books, things that you can listen to, or music, that kind of stuff. But the overall concept is a letter to help you engage more in the real world offline, but also enhance your creative process, your real tangible life. The first one that went out in January was about sparking creativity that might have been lost over time. The next one that's going out in February is going to be about resistance through movement and dance. So they give you sort of big, broader letters and sort of an internal things that you can think about throughout a month to enhance your creative process and get out and get inspired in different ways. And most importantly, communicate offline, because I really think it's important to support Canada Post and support our mail systems so that it never goes away. Other than my projects, can we do a quick round of hots? I know as we've been filming this, I have been watching the red carpet footage of Hudson Williams and Mark Carney, and they are adorable, and I cannot wait to show you both the videos of them after. I don't know if I can include it in here. If I can, I will. But what are your guys' hots for the week?
Hudson Williams all the way.
Yeah.
I have become completely obsessed with this man.
It's hard not to. Did you see his Wonderland magazine shoot? Hudson.
I've been there. I've been there. I've seen it.
It is lovely, and what a nice young man.
Yes, respectfully, what a beautiful human. Respectfully. Yeah. I just love his personality. Like, he's so fun, and he seems so genuine, and I'm also obsessed with his skincare routine. And I'm really if you you guys know this about me. I'm really obsessed with skincare, and just his skin is glowing, and I need to buy everything that he uses and, start on that immediately.
I love how he is representing Canada as well, and not to say he's a perfect representative of Canada, Um, because I think, walking down the street and lighting a cigarette in a city where it's illegal to do so, maybe not a perfect representative of Canada, but I think it's nice to see someone be real and be acknowledging, like, hey, I overnight was suddenly super famous and this is weird. But also, like, here's an interview I'm doing with Langara College. Like, he's not
Yeah,
forgetting that he like worked in New West and like he's from around here and all kinds of like very relatable Canadian stuff. And I kind of hope he stays that way.
me
I think he's
too.
I think he's a great representation of the quiet, rebellious nature of Canada, which is not
Mhm.
so quiet,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
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 I've also become a huge fan, obviously, it makes sense from Heated Rivalry. I wanted to shout out Francois Arnault from Heated Rivalry as well.
Hmm.
Um just I really appreciated that in interviews he has made a point of pushing back a little, and making and really highlighting how this show couldn't have been made, if it was like on Netflix or something like that, an American owned company,
Mhm.
just by sharing some of the stories that the creator has also shared. But I don't know. I really appreciate everybody who's highlighting, that there are elements of that production that are, I don't want to say unique to, but like not unique to Canada, but are definitely facilitated by having a really strong Canadian lens and a strong Canadian vision. And also, um, a Canadian backdrop.
Mhm.
I think that's really important. A lot of times Canada is just sort of seen as like a cheap place for American projects to film. And so it's really cool to see some projects that, come from Canadian storytellers that are also portrayed by some Canadian storytellers as well. And it's refreshing to see a plot that doesn't like center around, GoFundMe's for medical care.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
or
Yeah.
school
Or
shootings, which, it's not
Mhm.
it's not a laughing matter, but it really does, like, there are so many incredible stories that people living in Canada have to tell, and some of them are just, are really difficult if that is not, if it's not even acknowledged that it like took place in Canada, right? if
yeah.
if all of
Yeah.
our backdrop cities are just that, they're backdrops or they're stand-ins for American cities. So anyway, that's super hot.
Yeah, I agree. It was also really interesting to see, or not just interesting. I would say proud. It makes me very proud to see Mark Carney tonight when they were talking about Heated Rivalry. He Everybody's such a fan, but he came out and said, like, I'm going to take credit for greenlighting the funding for this. I know I wasn't in office at the time, but I'm going to take credit anyways because Hudson and I are now best friends. So, like, I love that it's given
Besties.
us, right? I love that it's given us something to like be proud of and be like, this is Canadian. This is our product. And this is like what we have been producing and working, like all the behind the scenes stuff in the industry that has been here for so long in Canada, the film industry. We have great workers that have been making it happen on like a shoestring budget for so long. They can do stuff with huge budgets as well. We have extremely talented people in this country, but being able to see how creative they were and how unfettered that creativity was, and knowing that our public funds went into a gay hockey love story, love that. Love that for our taxes. I
Yeah.
think there's no better use for our
And queer
taxes than that.
joy representation, right? Like we saw that in Schitt's Creek as well.
Yes.
It's so important to have queer stories that aren't just centered around trauma.
Mhm.
Um, yeah,
100%. Oh my gosh, because that happens so often where it's like there's never a happy ending for queer couples in a lot of media. So it was refreshing to finally see, a happy ending.
Yeah. And I'm just so happy to see, like, I know Connor Story is obviously American, some of the other actors are American, but the majority of the cast is Canadian. And it was so nice to see people who, and Francois Arnault is like very well known, has had a long career. But
Mhm.
it's so nice to see so many people going like, oh my God, I've never heard of these people. These are brand new faces. And when you watch a lot of Canadian TV, which over the last year I have really been trying to watch a lot of Canadian TV, it is all new faces, like people that we don't know. And I keep going like, they're really good. So this is a great show, actually. And I think that maybe going forward, Canada is going to stop dropping the actually at the end of that. Like, it's not going to be like, this is a great Canadian show, actually. It'll just be like, this is
Yeah.
a great Canadian show.
I want to mention a another hottie from Heated Rivalry, Sophie Nélisse. Am I pronouncing her name correctly? I hope I am. If I'm not, I'm sorry. And she played Rose, and
Yeah.
she's a huge actor. She plays a main role in Yellow Jackets. I don't know if you guys have seen that. Um, her role was small in the show, but I absolutely love her. And, she's a hottie. Yeah, hots of the week. We can't forget Sophie.
I'm so glad that we're laughing. I'm so glad that we started this with like, hey girls, let's chat about the horrors of our reality. And we are finally laughing about what's going on in the world. That is bringing us joy still, because as much as we are going through hard times, there are still hots. There are still things that bring us joy and make
Mhm,
us laugh. And I think the one
definitely.
way to get through all of this is to do it all together.
I
And
agree.
a couple of people have mentioned online, like, this is also it's a bit of a marathon rather than a sprint,
Mhm.
right? And the reality is, like, yeah, you can't you can't exist in fight or flight forever. I'm really bad at remembering to, like, take time for myself, engage in things that bring me joy, because yeah, I think it's really easy to fall into the trap of, like, feeling or thinking that experiencing joy at a time like this is weird. It means you're not doing enough. Like you said earlier, Marta, when it comes to, like, especially as a disabled person, like, oh man,
Yeah.
I'm not doing enough. But rest is part of this.
Yeah.
Staying hydrated is part of this, taking your meds and enjoying art and making art is part of this. And also, doing those things not necessarily for to share them online, but just for yourself.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
um, I think one thing to remember about fascism is that it thrives when we forget that to exist on its own is a beauty and something that every human is entitled to, right? Like, whether or not you are successful, whether or not you share your art online or you contribute, quote unquote, in the ways that you're supposed to, you just existing as a person, um, experiencing love and experiencing sorrows, and experiencing the world around you is also resistance, because it means you're here.
That's so
Yeah.
beautiful.
I
I
love
think
that. Oh, I love that.
I love that. I think that's the perfect end to our first episode. And
Yeah.
thank you guys so much. Where else can people find you?
So I'm on TikTok. My username is, oh gosh, it's so random. It's my summer wine with an underscore at the end. I like the song, okay? So I never intended to actually post on TikTok. So that's my username, my summer wine underscore. I am going to be making a Threads and a Substack, so maybe next episode I will be able to provide you with that information. And right
And
now, that's all.
Marta does a lot of really great content about disability and domestic violence and really heavy topics, but also really informative stuff that I really appreciate learning about.
And
So
she's a pop
Aw.
culture queen.
yes, also
Oh my
lots of pop
god.
culture, Game of
Thank
Thrones,
you.
and all
Yes.
of the other Game of Thrones' universe, whatever that's
A
called.
song a Song of Ice and Fire, big
Hmm.
fan.
Hmm.
In a parallel universe with either more spoons or less stresses, Marta would be posting a lot of pop culture. So I would definitely recommend following if you're
Yeah.
interested in keeping on the pulse.
Yeah, if things go well, it's just going to be Game of Thrones and Korean skincare.
Yeah.
So,
And and Bridgerton, because that is, after we finish this, I am probably going to be binging the first, I think there's 4 episodes out right now.
Oh yeah, that's right. And for me, I'm Bailey Colors everywhere. I identify myself first and foremost as an artist, and definitely felt a personal responsibility to speak out more about disability and politics leading up to last election. So, admittedly, a lot of my content is in that space right now. But yeah, I'm on Threads under Bailey Colors. That's where I try to help, try to share a lot of really maybe more urgent calls to action, kind of like that's where I'm posting multiple times a day to keep people up to date, up to speed of what's going on. But then I am also on YouTube. That is where I am sharing currently my longer form content. I do stick figure drawings, walking people through some, you know, foundational concepts, some fun little primers, trying my best to make certain things that are very dry a little bit of fun. So you can find that on YouTube and then also on TikTok. And I do sell my artwork. I'm really lucky to have that set up and be part of my life and part of what I do. So yeah, I think there are going to be a couple of exciting collaborations with Marta in the coming weeks and months, because I think we both identified that a lot of people with disabilities right now are struggling, and we wanted to find some ways that we could help. So more on that. And yeah, I will be trying some longer form writing on Substack just to kind of like have a all in one place for a few different topics. But yeah, Bailey Colors everywhere. If there's a new platform, I'm likely on it. And it
looking
is
for the
colors.
bots.
It's looking for the bots. And it's Bailey Colors spelled the American way. I'll share that story at some point, but it is COLORS for the time being.
And I will make sure to put all of those links down below in the description. If you need to click on them, I will find you guys so that you can all connect with Marta and Bailey as much as I do. All right. Well,
Yay.
thank you guys all so much for joining us for our first episode. We probably this is going to be super duper long by the time I edit it all. But,
No, cut out half of what I say.
it will be approximately 4 hours. We are going to try to do this every single week, and it'll just be like the three of us chatting about whatever is on our mind. But we do love to hear from you, so please leave it in the comments, especially if there's something that you think that we should be paying attention to on any of our social media feeds, a story that you think is pretty urgent or important, or maybe even just overlooked. If you're from another part of Canada that we're missing something, or another part of the world that we're missing something, please let us know. And that's it. That is our first episode of 49 Clicks. Until we see you again. Sorry.
Please don't die.
It was just a cough. Give me 1 second.